All right, good timing.
Yeah, really good timing there. How's it going, Matt?
It's going very well, David. How are you? I'm all things considered, it's going well, I should say. How's things out on the West Coast?
Things are going all right. Um, yeah, just missing the sunshine a little bit, but yeah, man, pretty crazy past couple of days. Everybody, welcome to Left Reckoning, our last episode of 2020. Man, what a year! It's been quite the ride. But I'm really looking forward to this show and also for the next year. If y'all aren't familiar, my name is David Griscom. I'm here with Matt Leck. And we got a lot to talk about today. We got to break down this kind of stimulus nightmare, why the Democrats continue to just be feckless despite all of the evidence that people are clamoring for help. Some good news in Argentina, and also an interesting story about just how much of a slime ball Donald Trump is, and all of the and also a reminder of all the worms that he brought into his administration and their long-lasting effects on Indian country. So a lot to get to today, man. You ready for it?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, I mean, we got to, I'm sure everybody's been glued to their TV today, sort of breaking down this, pretty despicable fight in the Senate, where we are seeing, Mitch McConnell and the Republicans basically refuse to vote, not to, accept or to pass something, but just to hold a vote on a much needed $2,000 emergency payment to people who are continuing to suffer from the COVID-19 crisis. And essentially what's been going on is, Senator Mitch McConnell said that he won't consider the stimulus payments separately from two other demands. One is an investigation into election security, and also the repeal of Section 230, protections for social media platforms, basically protecting social media platforms from being, liable for what people are posting on them. Now, obviously, this is a poison pill strategy for Mitch McConnell, but it's one that I think is becoming very clear that the Democratic Party in general, they're not prepared to do the kind of fighting that is necessary to call Mitch McConnell out on this pretty disgusting bluff. And really, the only person who has been leading the fight in the Senate has been none other than Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, here's Bernie on the Hill.
On everything, I got to say, as somebody who disagrees with Trump on everything, he's right on the need for this $2,000 check. And I hope the Republican leadership listens to him. And the other issues that are out there, do you think, Jim, that all over America people are saying, my God, we have to repeal Section 230 of the 1996 Telecommunications Act? My God, that is a major national priority. Nobody even knows what that is. And the other thing about voter fraud, Trump keeps talking about how he won the election. Nobody in their right mind believes that. He lost the election. we can separate those issues. Do we want to take a look at Section 230? It's an important issue. Yeah, we should. There's a way to do that. Not now. How do we create elections so that everybody can find it more easily, can more easily vote? Do we do away with voter suppression? There are issues out there. We can discuss it. But right now, the issue on everybody's mind is, how do I survive? How do I feed my kids? How do I not get evicted? So what we have got to do is just demand that McConnell bring forth a clean House bill. The House did it. By the way, they did it in a bipartisan way. I think there were 46 Republicans who voted for it. Bring it to the floor. I can't guarantee that it's going to win.
There you go.
Yeah, and I mean it's exceptionally clear to anyone with a brain what's going on here right now, that the GOP is trying to make it impossible to just hold a basic vote on the $2,000 payment, because that is something that is extremely popular, and no member except for the most lunatic and ideologically committed members of the GOP to the death cult of being a deficit hawk and free market economics, other than the most just the ones who are just so committed to that just disgusting ideology, they're going to vote for it, because nobody wants to go back home to people who are suffering, people who are worried about paying their rent, people who are worried about getting medicine, people who are worried about their health, their health care and their family's health and health care. No one is going to want to go on back home and face their constituents saying, oh yeah, I opposed paying you $2,000 in the middle of this crisis.
Yeah, and this is Bernie at his best, and also probably the best a senator can be. But there's also a little bit of collegiality that's getting in the way of maybe even being a little clearer about what the Republicans are doing with these issues, which is they're holding you hostage so that they can either interfere with the election and craft future elections more to their liking. Because Bernie suggests they want to work together to make it easier for people to vote. That's not what the Republicans are after here. And likewise with Section 230, I think, well, we can entertain certain arguments about Section 230 and the place of tech companies, but not in this moment where you're using, again, people's acute needs as hostage for, rushing through that process in a way that obviously is not going to be productive for anything we want.
And it should be noted too that what Bernie Sanders has been doing in trying to push this through the Senate, he has been trying to hold up the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, which is another one of these passed yearly. It's another one of these just bloated, I think that's $750 billion military budget, something around there, maybe 730 billion. But it's another one of these, despicable, bloated military budgets that are just, set up to continue to, push, U.S. imperialism abroad and to just waste so much funds and continue pushing forward this really disgusting war machine. Anyways, Bernie Sanders is not going to let the Senate push through the NDAA if they're not going to give people $2,000 a month, which is a great strategy because it's something that that both the Republicans and the Democrats want to push through. Nobody wants to go home and say that, we don't have a funded military anymore, right? It's a perfect tactic. It's the kind of tactic that the Republicans do all the time against the Democratic Party. It's the kind of tactic that Mitch McConnell is doing right now against these $2,000 a month payments. And Bernie Sanders is just showing again why not only is he, an incredibly moral person and important part of this movement, but he's an incredibly talented senator and politician. And just put that in your back pocket when you remember all these ghouls who talk about how Bernie Sanders just sat around the Senate and got nothing done. I mean, he's been doing these kind of moves for decades because he understands how these systems work, and he's going to try to leverage as much as possible these systems into helping out everyday people. Yeah,
exactly right. I mean, what he did with Josh Hawley, who is not your friend, he's an anti-union culture war freak. But if he's going to squawk about being a friend to people, make him put his money where his mouth is. And yeah, I mean, thank God Bernie's there to do that. And I also do want to credit Ed Markey, because we'll get to Dick Durbin and some of the other Democratic leaders who are really fucking up here. But I just want to play a short clip because Markey's getting out there too. And it's just like, this is why, for instance, I think Kennedy, they tried to install a Kennedy against this guy. Here he is on the floor of the Senate.
I rise to echo the sentiments of the senator from Vermont. He is right. The Republicans are wrong on this issue, on every single part of this debate. Senator Sanders is right. The Republicans are wrong. We're in the middle of an unprecedented crisis in our country. We have a health care crisis. We have an unemployment crisis. We have a hunger crisis. We have a housing crisis. We have an addiction crisis. We have a moral crisis in this country. The United States government should be responding to the needs, to the desperation of families in our country at this time. I rise to echo the sentiment.
Yeah. I mean, that's 100% right. And I think that was good to point out, too. It's like, it's not that Bernie Sanders is alone. It's that the structure of that party is very much against people like, Markey. And like, I think, bringing up that Senate race is a great example of that. They don't want representatives in the Senate agreeing with Bernie Sanders about this kind of thing. I think it might be worth it, just since, we're on it, to do the Dick Durbin thing, to just put that in juxtaposition with what Bernie Sanders represents. So this is the Senate minority whip. So a leader of the Democratic Party, Dick Durbin, basically pushing back against the idea, Bernie Sanders' idea of holding up the NDAA until they can hold, a vote on the $2,000 stimulus payments.
They came up with a good bill, one I was proud to support.
I also want to say, Doug Jones also did this, and he started off with, I worked hard on it. It's like, motherfucker, you're a senator. You better be working hard on everything you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you're not my fourth grader. What are you talking about? I worked hard on this.
Yeah.
Work harder until I get $2,000. That's register that these 70-years go into.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're just so self-indulgent. It's just so self-indulgent, these people. They think, it was just like when Nancy Pelosi was going on about how she feeds us. Remember that a couple of weeks ago? She's like, I feed the people. I feed the American people. It's like, screw you. As I said then, it's like, no, we feed her. Like, they're reliant on us. Yeah, and the way that they expect us to treat them is like, oh, I worked really hard on trying to, put together a bill. It's like, shut up and do your job. This is a fight. This is a political fight with like actual stakes, like life and death stakes for people. And you want to whine about, oh, I worked really hard on this, so let's, I don't want to put anything in jeopardy.
And I want to go home for New Year's Eve.
Exactly. That's the one thing that they're not saying. I worked hard on this, so I need to go on vacation, y'all.
They came up with a good bill, one I was proud to support. This annual legislation has been signed into law for 6 consecutive decades. When the Senate fails to do anything, they always do the National Defense Authorization Bill. It shows that Congress can come together, at least on this measure, when it comes to supporting our men and women in uniform and keeping our country safe.
Like 60 years of defense, firmly, or just about definitely outside of World War II era. So what are we proud of the 60 years we've just been authorizing?
Vietnam, Desert Storm, Afghanistan. Yeah. And they use this, I'm telling you, they use this as a blunt instrument to just force through anything. The NDA is just such a holy cow for the swamp, man. It's the swamp.
Yes. Hey, Trump did take a stand.
And that's why, by the way, that's why we're seeing these early reports that people working for weapons manufacturers are getting preferential spots in the vaccine. I don't know if you've seen that yet, but in the vaccine lines, people working for Northrop Grumman, those are people who are deemed, they're not in the first round, but like they're in the second round or something like that. Like they're giving higher treatment than other than the rest of us, right? And again, that's the swamp. That's just these people who run the system continually patting themselves on the back, rewarding each other, while people in this country suffer, and then people around the globe die violent deaths due to U.S. military escapades.
This year, the bill authorizes $740.5 billion in defense spending. It provides another 3% well-deserved pay raise for our troops. It also recognizes that many in the armed forces are on the front lines here at home as well, helping fight the ongoing COVID-19 epidemic, providing our troops with necessary benefits and protections, including a 10% increase in hazardous duty pay. The bill also includes a number of provisions that I authored and supported, including language expressing strong support for the Baltic states and Ukraine, especially in the face of continued unforgivable Russian aggression.
Yeah. We can pull it up. I mean, he doesn't go anywhere. He just repeats himself again. And like, look, here's the thing. Again, it's like, this is why this party infuriates me. And this is why it infuriates me so much that we just went through another year, 2020, another one of these historic elections that if we don't get the results, right, if the Democratic Party isn't ushered into power and the Republican menace is finally defeated, right? If we don't get that, then the whole system will collapse. Everything will collapse. What do we get from putting in these kind of Democratic members of these Democratic leaders? It's this kind of crap. It's saying that we're not going to give people 2K payments. And also what we're getting from Durbin right there is he's actually saying something which I think is quite despicable. And it's a framing choice that Durbin is using to try to smash the left by saying, if you basically are trying to push for $2,000 payments, right, by using this kind of legislative tactic to get that to those ends, you are standing against getting a 3% pay raise for rank and file soldiers, right? It's like, no, Mitch McConnell is the one who is putting us into that kind of position of desperation that we are trying to get the most basic payments for people, and we actually have to resort to putting all sorts of things in the balance to try to achieve that goal, right? That is a rhetorical choice by Durbin and members of the Democratic Party who are doing that to attack Bernie Sanders, and it's a disgusting one. And also, it just has to be said time and time again that this party, the leadership of the Democratic Party, they crumble anytime anything related to military spending is brought up. This is how the Republicans are able to get what they want from them over and over and over, because they are so petrified of ever being accused of not standing with the troops, right? When all you need is to just have some freaking brass balls and say, no, it's Mitch McConnell over here who's putting all this entire system at risk by refusing to hold a vote. Again, not to pass, to hold a vote on something that is immensely popular in this country and is desperately needed. I mean, it's a rhetorical choice, and that's why they fought so hard to prevent Bernie Sanders from being the presidential candidate. That's why they were primarying Markey. This is exactly why this party operates in the way that they do, because they don't want somebody coming and telling the truth like Bernie Sanders is right now, and they want to continue this kind of old school bipartisan, just push just kick the can down the road over and over and over, never deal with the fact that we waste an incredible sum of money on our military spending. This is a military budget that is so big that professional auditors say it actually just can't even be audited, right? Like, think about that for a second. It's just they fall over all the time.
What impact that has in the world. Yeah, totally. Just, I have Joe Biden's response, if you want.
Yeah, I think we should go into that.
So Joe's been quiet. So is Kamala. Although the K-Hive has been quick to say, I
know
she did support it initially, guys. So she's trying to fight off a coup. I mean, that is really, look, I do think there's a bit of over coolness about what the Republican Party is doing. At the same time, when you start getting in the, like, Kamala can't speak out for $2,000 checks because there's a coup happening, you lose me. So here's what Joe Biden says. Asked if he supported the larger stimulus checks. Without turning around or breaking stride, Biden replied yes and walked off the stage. Now,
Jesus Christ.
I just want to... Now, I did see some people saying, hey, he said he supports it, which is like the absolute bare minimum. What would... If he just ignored it, that would be a huge story, okay? So, like, he didn't have a choice unless he, like, literally wanted to be the responsible for it, but he doesn't want. He would rather, like, this just goes off his plate entirely. But I mean, remember what he said. I just want to point this out from the Zoom call.
And you remember, a lot of you told me talking about the soul of America was going over people's heads. They didn't know what we're talking about. The words of a president matter. What a president says matters. And you've never seen...
And I would say a corollary to that, I don't know if I'm using that correctly, is that what a president doesn't say matters, and what a vice president doesn't say matters. And I think it's despicable, because I think, like, if you really want to play this for pressure, do it. Because that's the only thing that's changed here, really, with the Democratic Party, is that they've, like we said last week, like, they fielded a grounder and are pushing to some advantage. Yeah. And they fundamentally can't, like, the major leverage is McConnell wants to get particularly the Georgia senators, but the rest of them out of there before New Year's Eve. That's not a whole lot of leverage, and it's probably not enough to get people $2,000 if I had to guess.
No.
But at least they're doing it. And then you have all these other people, and like Schumer and Pelosi have been supportive of it. It's interesting Durbin is doing this, because people don't really pay attention to Durbin as much as Pelosi and Schumer.
Oh, no doubt. And I think it also just has to be noted again what we covered, what was it, last week, that Joe Biden, the New York Times in their report on the negotiations for the last bill, where we got this $600 payments, which I just got to say it again. That's just like, fuck you money. I mean, that really is just,
it's Lucille
Bluth. Yeah. Like those memes have been on point, because that is just how little they care for the actual desperation that most people are living through. And we're going to go through just like a horrendous argument against the $2,000 payments in a second. But it needs to be noted that, Joe Biden was apparently very instrumental in that $600 payments, in getting people to accept the original lower payments. So for him to now come out and, for all these people be like, look, Joe Biden's supporting it too, the Democrats are supporting us, the GOP, that's the problem. It's like, yeah, no doubt that the GOP is the problem. But you know what? It was also centrist Democrats who put us in this position right now, where we're debating, we're trying to get a $2,000 payment instead of a $600 payment. And Joe Biden, according to the New York Times, was instrumental. Not that he just had a position on it. He was instrumental on getting people to accept the $600 payment.
Yeah, I think we talked about this last week, but he said they gave them the confidence to pull back on their demands.
Yes, that was the term.
I want to try to some sort of project where it's to try to tap into the sort of resistance conspiracy brain, but to get them to think of these centrists as like Mitch McConnell little sleeper cells, like doing exactly what they want. Because they're really, Klobuchar, it was Klobuchar last week who was saying, this is an attack on democracy, saying we want to go for more than $600. No, the fact that you worked so hard on a bill that ultimately gave like all sorts of disgusting giveaways and ended up only giving your voters $600 a piece that's the attack on democracy, Amy. It's coming from inside the Senate.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's worth bringing up this too, in Joe Biden's own words, right? The words of the president matter, so do the actions and the appointments. And I wanted to, if you have that Common Dreams piece, I wanted to bring people's attention to something that he has been doing while we're having these negotiations. Joe Biden taps, this is from Common Dreams, Jake Johnson. Biden taps Bruce Reed, deficit hawk and longtime enemy of Social Security, for deputy chief of staff. So this is somebody who worked on the horrendous and monstrous destruction of welfare in this country under the Bill Clinton administration. This is somebody who has spent their career fighting for Social Security cuts, right? And in the middle of this pandemic, and something I've been saying to people, what I'm very worried for is what's going to happen 6 months from now. People are, scraping by. They're using their savings to pay their rent. People are behind on rent. 6 months, we're going to be entering into a country that's going to be, it's already bad now. We're going to be entering in a country that is going to be much worse, right? And that you're putting people like this into power, into the top aide for your chief of staff, sends a clear message that what we're going to see from Joe Biden is not going to be this champion of the working man, working families, and fighting to make sure that people get the aid that they deserve. It's going to be tighten your belts, austerity Joe Biden. And that's who he's bringing into this administration.
Yeah, I can't get over the fact that to those civil rights leaders, all he could give them words, look into Vilsack's record a bit deeper. And this is going to be, I'm going to save the bully pulpit for decency. Reserve it for being nice to people and just let the commercials do their work and lead to a, multiracial harmony. I don't really have anything more to say besides that. It's going to be, it's going to be disgusting, and particularly to see, if this $2,000 somehow gets passed, which I think could only happen if McConnell thought it would definitely save the Georgia senators. And I'm not even convinced he thinks they definitely need it. But if he does, I do think you'll see, you'll start to see deficit hawks in the Democrats. And I mean, I'm ready for that fight. I can't wait to start having that fight. I mean, part of this, all this Thomas Friedman stuff, maybe we should go to that now.
Yeah, I think 100%. But I just wanted to say to people real quick as we move over that one, last week we didn't get to Discord questions. We'll be taking Discord questions tonight. So if you're a patron, definitely put those in, and we'll get to those at the end of the show tonight. And then also, if you're not already supporting us, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/leftreckoning. Next week
we can near 600 patrons.
I think we're about 5 away from 600 patrons, so this would be a great time to sign up right now and be and help us achieve that milestone. It's been really beautiful. I really appreciate all the support that we've got from everybody, and we're continuing to grow, and really looking forward to 2021 where we're going to start having our weekly show Thursdays at 7 Eastern. We have some really exciting guests, a lot of stuff to get to, and we'll be bringing back the post game and all that kind of stuff. I think people have also been asking for me to bring back the theory readings, so I'll get back into the habit of doing that too. But we really are building a lot of content out there starting in January, so definitely come and support us if you are able to. But I wanted to, I just want to get that out there. So we'll definitely be taking Discord questions later today too. But okay, Matt, this is
so yeah, I guess let me finish the thought, which I had a moment to cool on it a little bit, at least in my temper, but I want to repeat say what I was originally intending to say, which is that people are too comfortable expressing these opinions. Like, we've created too much of a safe space for certain opinions. Particularly, we should take money out of people's pockets and food out of their mouths during a pandemic. Like Tom Friedman, what's his nuts, the Harvard guy that I'm blanking on his name, that was like toying around, Larry Summers.
Oh yeah, Summers. God, what a pig that is.
Disgusting. I mean, it's amazing the type of free speech that the internet has allowed and like modern media has allowed, because you can express those feelings to multiple people. And I think it's disgusting. I think it would get you socked in a bar if you went and talked like that. So, and I would support that.
And we need to start building that kind of mentality. And also, this is why, trying to build these kind of alternative platforms is really important for news media, because we do need like working class focused news media, because these guys get quoted, on CNN. They're brought on as guests. Obviously, Friedman is a columnist. I mean, these people are like respected intellectuals in the news media, and they should be taken down. They
set the terms of policy. Yeah. Like Obama, it's not just like George Bush gets off on these guys. Obama was the reason he got like safe for the media elites was because he started reaching out to Thomas Friedman and how smart he is, and he's not. Like, it's pure psycho. It's terrifying. It's really like people just what's the Jonathan Swift thing about eating infants? It's just like them deciding to do that, but for real. Like, we're just, it's for debate, guys. We're just going to debate if we're going to have a mass eviction crisis because we need to be frugal because we think of the government's budget like a household or some shit. And a household that has infinite money to spend on defense, for instance.
It's the household thing, but honestly, it's like they really are afraid of people not just getting aid, but actually any working class people experiencing any amount of comfort. Right? They want people to continue to live in this. And honestly, we should get into this, because I have a really great example. So we were going to do Friedman, but honestly, he's too easy. He's too moronic. You can just tell whenever you have a big moment like this that he's going to take the nastiest kind of anti-people perspective. And there's been a lot of articles against $2,000 payments. We saw in the New York Times, there was a piece called "Most Americans are expected to save, not spend their $600 check," which was another one of these. Oh, we surveyed some rich people who said, "I don't need the money." That's being sort of used as an example. I mean, the fixation.
Give it away, asshole! I thought you guys are so good at charity. This is ridiculous. You all of a sudden have $2,000 more that you don't need. Give it to somebody. Go walk outside You know, it'd be really fun for you. You can even film it. Like buy a GoPro with $400 of it and then film yourself, you know, being a baller. Honestly, like it'd be better than agitating publicly for this not to happen. And also, who was it? Was it Friedman on Twitter saying like that it's untargeted? It is targeted. This is a means tested like thing. Why are we acting like it's not? It's based on 2019 income, which is insane to do during a pandemic where people's income's completely whacked. Decimated. And it's for people, everybody making under 75K, which fine. Like at least that's not 35, right? But yeah.
And the point is just like, it's just a good thing to give people money in this kind of situation, to have people having more money in their pockets, to hopefully be spending it. And I understand the arguments, that these wealthy people will just sock it away. That is a problem, no doubt about it. But like, the fact is that you give a lot of people this kind of money, they're going to be able to buy the necessities that they need. They're going to be able to, get debt collectors off their back. And like, look, the fact is that people have been desperate in this country for decades now. I mean, how many times have we read these stories about how, most Americans don't have more than $400 in their bank account, right? Like this is just the kind of general stimulus that is needed. And it's just one of those things. It's like, okay, I don't want to give money to Jeff Bezos either, right? Screw him. But it's a bad faith argument, because what they're trying to do is they're just trying to muddy the water so that nothing gets done. And I think we have to take this energy into this Washington Post editorial, owned obviously by the the baron of our time, Jeff Bezos. And this is from their editorial board. Why increasing the stimulus checks from $600 to $2,000 is a bad idea. Oh, man, the Washington Post. All right. The first line here is just so despicable, right? Given how 2020 has gone, we should probably have known it would end with Congress and the president wasting their final days on one last bid, $2,000 per person direct payments, supposedly to offset the hard economic times brought on by the coronavirus pandemic. Let me just start here, right? Because it does not get better. So what they actually, let's get this second part, because they're going to pat themselves on the back, right? I think it's important actually to get this second part. First of all, that just, what a whiny opening line. Like, oh yeah, oh, what a goofy kind of end to 2020 that there are people in the Senate, namely Bernie Sanders and Markey, who are trying to get payments to like struggling people right now. Yeah, what a goofy way to end the year. I mean, you have to.
Sorry, go finish your thought.
I mean, like, you just have to just be not just out of touch, but just like think of the rest of the country with such malice, or just like not even think about the rest of the people in this country, to think that it's a goofy or like a waste of time to spend the end of the year debating whether or not people deserve a higher payment.
Honestly, it sounds like you put a microphone in like a vampire house. Like, what are you talking about?
So this is their pat on the back. As we have previously pointed out, there was a case for including modest checks to the hardest hit low income segment of the population. In the $908 billion stimulus, it did pass. However, Congress went well beyond that. All right. I mean, again, like, this is that's just such a despicable line too. $600 doesn't pay for rent anywhere. Right? It doesn't take care of people in the way that they need to be taken care of. So to act like, oh, wow, this extra, this $600 payment, oh, the poors must be so excited to receive $600. I mean, it's insulting to people to say that. So they complain about $3,000 for families of five. Jesus Christ. I can't, don't even get me started there. And then obviously the complaint about how it's going to give money to people who make $150,000 to $210,000 a year. And they also complain that people are going to get more unemployment benefits, so that now the neediest are short-shrifted and billions are showered on people who suffered little to no lasting hardship from the pandemic, right? So let's just start here. First of all, like we've all suffered immensely during this pandemic. If you were like, I was talking to one of my friends the other day who's a lawyer, and he said, if this had happened to you as an individual and you like were to sue an organization for like, just like what the quarantine has done to people emotionally, the payment that you would be getting from that settlement would be a hell of a lot more than $3,200, right? Which is what we're hoping to get, right? Just like what's happened to people, just on like a basic human level, like this has been immensely difficult for people.
And it is more than that in most other countries in the world. It is significantly more than that. It's like, you know, like a significant percentage of what your expected wages were, and not the 2000, you know, that whole bullshit.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about on this show. I mean, the whole way that they've treated this, the government has treated this pandemic has been disgusting. You can't shut everything down and then not give people the means to sustain themselves. It's just it's a recipe for disaster, and that is exactly what's happened. But let's just drop that for a second. This kind of like self-congratulatory, like honestly, just like masturbatory piece that we're seeing in the Washington Post is so disgusting, especially because of this. We have had months for these people who are so wedded to centrist politics, to means testing, you know, these zombies who cleared so dearly to that old, tired, and just disproven religion. We've had months for those people to come up with, get support for, and to push forward this kind of centrist bill that they're talking about, this perfect means tested bill, right? We are in December 2020, and it is hilarious in a disgusting way that we are having this debate at the last moment of 2020. We've had months seeing what this virus has done to communities and to people's economic situation, what it's done to people's livelihoods. We've had months for them to come up with a good solution, and they haven't done it. So it's honestly, it's really disgusting for them to now stand at the end of, you know, December 30, and not only write an article against it, but actually say like, oh, it's so goofy, it's hilarious that this is what they're doing right now. This sums it up perfectly. Honestly, this is like one of the first times that we've seen any kind of just basic hope from people that they're going to get some form of relief.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to note on the original CARES Act how actually amazing that would have been if that was recurring, and how much it did do, and why I think there's a fear among like the ruling class to do it again. Because let's see, where I just lost my article, but oh yeah, this is from Human Rights Watch. But basically, I'll just read a little bit. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused unemployment in the United States to reach its highest. We all know that. Yet the first months of the crisis, poverty fell to historic lows, and total income made up of wages and government support for the poorest households rose at an unprecedented rate. How could this be? The answer, according to a recent study, is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, passed by Congress in March. The act was one of the largest expansions of the social safety net since the New Deal of the 1930s, which goes to show how little we expand the safety net in this country. This expansion, however, was short-lived. Key benefits such as an additional $600 in weekly unemployment benefits expired at the end of July, forcing 8 million people into poverty. Right, so this is all a choice. These are just choices that are being made to whether throw millions of people in poverty or not. Which is why I started this segment the way I did. It's disgusting that people feel so comfortable in voicing things that have this, this type of effect. And it is like they're afraid of doing that, because we do become a fundamentally different country if we just decide that Congress can get rid of poverty like that, because it can just decide to do that.
That's exactly it. Like they're afraid of what kind of expectation people will have if they have some of their needs met by this government, which for all of, our life has just fundamentally failed working class people, right? They are afraid of what people will start to put two and two together, that, oh wait, actually the government can provide relief to us. The government can write us checks if we need it. I mean, they don't want that kind of situation. And I just like, I want to get back, some of the stuff in the text is just so rich. So if the $2,000 payout is a bad idea, it's a bad idea whose time has come because of politics, blah, blah, blah. President Trump deserves primary blame, which is hilarious.
Wait, that is amazing. it's become because of politics, not economics.
Yeah.
Where does this come from?
Because they're saying that the economy is doing well, which again just shows you what world these people are living in, right? Because yes, the economy is doing well for some people right now, namely the billionaires who have increased their wealth by $1 trillion since the pandemic has started, right? Corporations who have been able to take advantage of these like luxurious government programs and historically low interest rates. Yeah, it's doing really well for people like that, but not for everybody else. And it's just the metrics that they are using to say that the economy is doing well are so despicable when we literally were having 20 million people in this country, right? And I'm sure that is just like an underestimate. 20 million people in this country watching Congress with bated breath, hoping that the US government would extend an eviction moratorium. Remember, not rent relief, not assistance, not aid to these people, that people would not be thrown out of their house at the end of this moratorium, right? You're going to sit here and say that the economy is doing well when that's the situation that people are living under. I mean, give me a break.
What numbers? Is this the stock market? What do they point to say the economy is doing well?
Let me get it. I think they just assert it.
It's amazing. Like it's clearly not the unemployment rate, right? And like, which I don't like as a metric either, because I feel like it's, when it comes to the New York Times and Washington Post, it feels like the capitalists bragging about how hard they got everyone working. But that's remarkable.
So then I'm sure you're not good. This is honestly, and this is such a really nasty argument too that they make here. The next bit of this piece, which is just classic anti-Bernie Sanders argument, where they sort of basically try to imply that Bernie Sanders is a Republican, especially wrongheaded is the progressive left, spearheaded by Bernie Sanders, who depicts the $2,000 as aid to desperate Americans, despite the huge amounts destined for perfectly comfortable families. Then again, Republican would-be populists such as Josh Hawley have made common cause with Mr. Sanders. So basically, Bernie Sanders is, making common cause with the Republicans. And this is the funniest part that I wanted to bring up right here. Only the Senate can stop this wasteful policy. Mitch McConnell. Think about that right now. You have to be honestly just an absolute ghoul. Honestly, a demon, something that has just crawled up from the depths of hell to sit here right now in 2020 as people are continuing to suffer and to say our only hope, our one hope, what we need so much is for Mitch McConnell to come and save the day. And these people aren't just out of touch, right? Like these people aren't just out of touch. These people, there's no kind of like confrontation. There's no kind of documentary or experience that they can drive through America and see what's going on that would change these people's minds. To write something like this, to have this kind of perspective, this kind of anti-people perspective, this anti-worker perspective, it comes from a deep understanding that they benefit from this system. It's a real fear, not just that people are going to get the aid that they need, that God forbid that somebody might be able to get a little bit of comfort, that for a moment, for a month, you might not have to be freaking out about paying your rent at the end of the month, that for, a couple of weeks, you can take a deep breath and just have your head above water after, struggling your entire life, working on a wage that is inadequate for this incredibly bloated and inflated cost of living in this country, right? You have to be somebody who understands all too well that if people can experience that kind of comfort, that they are going to start to demand something more. And that's fundamentally what this kind of reaction that we're getting from these people, these ghouls at the Washington Post is about. They don't want people to be comfortable because they don't want people to look around and recognize that, one, the government can do more for them, and two, that life can be a hell of a lot better, and three, that there are a lot of people in this country who are living in a very different circumstance that they are. People in the Washington Post, it's no accident that this is a publication that is owned by the wealthiest man,
a billionaire. Yes,
somebody who they write fawning pieces about how he might very soon be a trillionaire in our lifetime, right? There's no accident about that, and there's no accident that they're making this kind of it's just not just tone deaf and out of touch. It's an argument that comes from their deep understanding that this system benefits them, and giving people direct payments is something that actually threatens that hegemony that they have over people and over people's minds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't,
I mean, we honestly, thanks everybody for listening to this. I just had to get that off my chest because it's infuriating. I really hope that Bernie Sanders is able to pull this out. Just continued support of that man in this fight. And these are the real kind of congressional fights that can make a difference in people's lives, right? These are like the actual kind of political strategy conversations that we need to be having about how we can leverage this immense support in the middle of a pandemic to make sure that people are protected. And that's what I have to say on that.
I agree totally. I mean,
So
it's really interesting, like just the staring down the jaws of true psychopaths who, the Washington was like a memo for them. Like, oh yes, we're going to give Mitch McConnell permission basically to, like, it's one thing. I mean, look, I don't think McConnell really gives a shit which way Washington Post does or whether, but it's just like, that's sort of like, that's how all the elites get on the same page.
mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, oh, actually, McConnell, we don't like McConnell for a lot of things he does, but this time, I don't know. I understand, and I don't like why certain people boost Josh Hawley, but in this company, I mean, solidarity, Comrade Hawley, for like going against Mitch McConnell, at least to like push it this far, because because the first of all, this painting, like, what they hate is the populism. They don't care that Hawley's a Republican, right? Mm-hmm. Like, they love all the Democrats that work with the good Republicans. Mm-hmm. So it's not even partisanship. Yeah. This is a purely like class-based fear that they have going on there. So it's. I
mean, coming from a paper and a political pundit class that just praised to all ends John McCain. Right. And everyone's friendship with John McCain and how beautiful that was and what that represented about America. To now say that it's and what ends was that bipartisanship with McCain furthering. I mean, it was furthering, American imperial escapades in Iraq. Right. And now Bernie Sanders is making some common cause with Hawley. Dude, I'm sorry, he's pro-fascist. Like, he's a bad guy. Right. Mm-hmm. But Bernie Sanders is taking this moment to say, like, OK, we can put pressure on the GOP to get people $2,000 checks. Like, that's the bipartisanship that these people hate.
If he doesn't do that, if there's no one to call Hawley's bluff, he just gets to rooster around like he's the true working people's champ. And like it's basically what Jeff Flake does for decency, Hawley does for the working people of the Republican Party, unless you call him on that. And like, you can't call people on decency because who gives a fuck, right? But you can call people on, like, okay, you think you're for working people, you better support these checks, Hawley. And if he has any, like, if he wants to stick to that brand at all, he has to do it. And the Democrats are complicit in never calling that bluff and being afraid to call those bluffs and allow that's the real fear. Now Bernie turns it back into a Republican problem, back to where all these resistance people that hate Moscow Mitch, 8 hours a day, where they should want the pressure. It's back on McConnell because he did that.
Yeah, man. Exactly. That's exactly right.
Well, damn, man, I can't believe that Washington Post piece was so.
No, dude. I mean, those pieces are funny because you expect them, obviously, but then when you actually dive into it, you're always like, wow, this is so much worse than I could have ever imagined that this argument was going to be. But I think we should bring some good news to, everyone who's watching the show right now. The world is a difficult and dark place, but, there are victories all around, and, we have to celebrate those and support each other throughout this. And I don't know if you have the tweet ready, but I just wanted to, introduce this real quick. In Argentina, a massive victory for people in general, but in particular, people who are fighting for women's rights in that country and the right to an abortion. That now abortion is legal in Argentina, which has been a huge fight that has been going on for years and years and years. I believe this is the 9th time that this has gone into the Senate. And what you finally saw was a flip from Kirchner and folks like that into supporting the abortion law. And you saw a vote that was actually a lot more definitive than people thought, with 38 voting in favor of legalizing abortion to 29 who voted against after a 12-hour debate. And this is something, again, this came out of years and years and years of organizing, serious organizing, and creating political communities and political organizations that could make people's demands heard. And it wasn't an easy fight, but it finally was victorious, and it's something to celebrate. And this video, if you have it, Matt, is so beautiful. This kind of jubilation that we have here. Yeah, that's so the celebrations last night seemed really incredible, and there's some great videos that you can check out on Twitter too. It seemed like a real party, and one that was well deserved.
Yeah, do you know much about? Maybe we should do a future show on the nature of that organizing, because with regards to abortion politics specifically, and being from where I'm from in North Dakota, which growing up I didn't notice how dominant anti-abortion stuff is in the culture there, like billboards or radio stuff, it's everywhere. And now that's like one of the most noticeable things when I go back home. Two events, now this is being the second, and also what happened in Ireland with regards to abortion. Like I must confess that like earlier on in my political sort of awareness, I wasn't one of those like throw the issue over, but it's like, gosh, this is like this is a complete defensive action. And I think these are very inspirational in the sense that like in places you wouldn't necessarily expect to have like to bear fruit based on these sort of fights.
Yeah. I mean, basically, from what I think we should do a deep dive into like the structures of this, but from what I understand, I mean, this took years and years of organizing, and particularly with something like that, like a social movement, I think having public displays of your feeling was really important. Because I'll say the same thing in the South. I know exactly what you're saying about that. And if you think that this is the cultural default, right, that like everybody's just anti-abortion, right? Then even if you might personally hold some other feelings or at least doubts about that being the correct way to conduct politics or a legal system and to prevent medical procedures, you don't feel like there's any outlet. You don't feel very safe in being out with that. And yeah, I think that's something that's really important. That's another reason why real social organizing it gets the goods, because you need a lot of people have beliefs that are in contradiction with the systems that we're living under, and you need to be out there letting people know that they're not alone. I mean, that's really what it's all about,
right? I mean, really it resembles the sort of out campaigns in that regard. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it was incredible. I mean, like some of the organizations I know came out of like the big 2015. There was massive protests across like Latin America against violence against women. Because that was something that was just under prosecuted, under investigated. That was obviously a major social problem that wasn't being addressed. And like again, this is how you can build political movements that are able to touch a lot of issues at once. So I think, again, just something that was incredibly inspiring and good news in a difficult time. So solidarity to everybody in Argentina, and the fight continues. Before we get to the last story, do we want to see if we have any Discord questions? Or
I just want to do one Matt Iglesias thing.
Why not, man?
I saw a article here, or not an article, it was an exchange on Twitter. I'm trying to be more grandiose than it deserves, but I saw an exchange on Twitter here between Matt Iglesias and Tyson Brody. Tyson Brody's original tweet says, "I think we should admit the ACA was, quote, we should admit the ACA was a historic achievement, unquote, discourse misses that while now folks point at Medicaid expansion, at the time the bill was passed, 90% of the discourse from proponents was about how good the now roundly mocked marketplaces were. And Matt Iglesias' ears are burning, so he says, this is a good example of what I don't know. This isn't in the thread, but he says, should progressives focus more on the fact that the ACA was a historic achievement that improved the lives of millions, or focus more on dunking on the fact that some of its proponents oversold the exchanges? And then Matt admits that he was a person that supported an incremental approach in this prospect piece, which what I want to talk about is, this was the first issue of sort of like a DC politics that I followed closely as like an adult. Like the Iraq War vaguely gave me my left-wing politics, but that was the Daily Show and radio. I'm like, I need to be serious about politics. So I started adding a lot of stuff to my RSS reader, rest in peace, including two gentlemen, Ezra Klein of Wonk Blog of Washington Post, and Matt Iglesias of, I think he might have been Washington Post too.
Or was it Slate? I don't know.
Or it might have been Slate. Yeah, something like that. But anyway, I had him in my RSS feed. And I read a lot of bullshit about marketplaces from both of those guys. A lot of really dumb bullshit that was a waste of my life, frankly, because I thought it was doing me better and making me more informed. And yes, Tyson Brody is exactly right. He responds to Iglesias's quote tweet with this: Matt, how come Moneybox deleted your October 1st, 2013 post with a video embargo about how good the marketplace would work? Again, that's what that is what that period was. I remember that. I will not be gaslit by Matt Iglesias that's some sort of incidental thing, right? Like this was honestly, like, to the extent that I am skeptical of markets, it's because of the failure of the promise that those guys were selling at that point.
And that was such a disaster. It left a lot of people out. And then obviously people were facing this very real threat, if you're a working person, that you were now going to get fined at the end of the year.
And it's an ongoing electoral disaster for the people who are deciding to pay the premiums. Right? Like that's the real reason Obama lost. It's a real October surprise. It wasn't fucking James Comey. It was that people like, oh, fuck. The healthcare guy said my healthcare was going to be taken care of, and look at my fucking bill.
And it's way worse. And look, I know, I'm sure all of our audience, are brilliant, smart people, but, there's kind of wonky folks out there being like, well, actually, it's the Republicans who are underfunding are not expanding Medicaid, blah, blah, blah. It's like, of course, the Republicans are going to do that. And that's what happens when you give them a huge opportunity to undermine your landmark historic bill. When you have all of the political power, right? When you control all of the necessary branches to be able to push through a kind of Medicare for all solution. And instead you take the Republican plan and you put in this kind of compromise before you even got to the negotiating table, Bill, the marketplace was a disaster, and markets worked like they tend to work. They're really good for the people at the top, and they're really bad for the people at the bottom.
Yeah, and the bottom is a lot bigger than you might guess based on how Ezra Klein tells you this is going to be good for you.
The bottom is a lot bigger than the Washington Post editorial board thinks it is in this country. I mean, honestly, like they think $600 is so much to us too, which is disgusting. Like, don't get me wrong, $600, is not something that I would turn my nose up at. But what they think that's going to get somebody. That it's going to be a life-changing amount of money for folks is so disgusting.
It's if you're lucky to like not have a partner, for instance, who like lost a job or something during this, right? Like, it's not $600 is over a second time after $1,200. That $1,800 total is ridiculous. I mean.
No, exactly. And these are people who were freaking out when the DC, the city, passed a minimum wage expansion, right? These are people who are all worried about this isn't a perfectly worked out wonky policy.
The anti-tipping thing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. God.
Actually, I didn't put this up in the show notes, so maybe give me 1 second to find this, but I think there is something regarding tipping that we should talk about.
Okay, cool. Do you want to, while you're looking for that, should I do one of these questions?
Yeah, why don't you do that sounds great.
So here's from a Daniel Slapkoff. Hey, I'm a new patron supporter. Thanks, Daniel. I'm really happy to support the show. Your voice are needed. I'm excited to keep learning. I was wondering if you had seen Jordan Peterson's new video.
Oh no.
He reads a short section of the rule 1 in his book, of his new book. And the rule is: do not carelessly criticize social institutions or creative achievement. I feel like his rhetoric in the video speaks an attitude that is present in conservative circles, also in Democratic Party, that basically serves as a blanket justification to marginalize and shame any criticism of the status quo. I mean, coming from a guy whose entire mission is to take down like the Canadian university system because they wanted him to be a bit more sensitive to the identity of its students. Like, no, I mean, I guess that's hard for me to swallow from Jordan Peterson. Don't criticize institutions, except all these these professors, that everyone is brainwashing you to hate Western civilization. But other than that, institution's great. Like, yeah, fuck out of here. But maybe we should do that.
No, that sounds, honestly hilarious. It's, I mean, it's going to be interesting having Jordan Peterson back from whatever, like, Soviet spa he has been for the past year. And
yeah, they gave him what's that old mystic, that Russian mystic guy? Rasputin. Yeah, they gave him they gave me whatever Rasputin had after he got shot several times, thrown into a lake. So yeah, okay. So that's,
thanks for the suggestion.
Yeah, that's we'll have to, I had taken JP out of my sort of consciousness for rotation, but I guess he's newsworthy again. Final Discord question here. A friend wants me to watch the guy he gets his COVID info from on Tim Pool's show tonight. I don't know much about either, other than Tim Pool seems to kind of posse profiteer type. Yeah, I mean, Tim Pool is exceedingly stupid and bad faith. And I mean, you don't name the guy who does the COVID info, so that could be an actual expert he's debating, or it could be some lunatic who says, this is all a hoax. It's hard to say. Could be probably the latter, if I had to guess, Tim Pool. So I'd be skeptical. I mean, yeah, Tim Pool is super. It's amazing because I've been in the same room with Tim Pool on one occasion before.
Yeah, you should tell that.
I was in NYU. In case people wonder where my student debt is from. I was at NYU getting my master's degree in a course I will name called Video Game Theory. And for some reason, Tim Pool came in to speak to a class period. And to be honest, the class was pretty amazing. We talked a lot, like, deep into philosophers and what, like, sort of being in a video game teacher. Anyway, the worst session was the session Tim Pool guest lectured. And just to add up in terms of video game economy, every class period I went, it was twice a week class, I was paying the equivalent of a PS4 in cost. So that's how much I went to. I got up in the morning and got the train to Manhattan to go see Tim Pool talk to me about his time as a reporter in Occupy, which is where I first heard about him. He's basically doing live streams. Fine to do. But he doesn't have any political understanding, and he basically squatted that sort of attention economy, wanting access to the live streams. And now he doesn't do any work like that. Like, that was actual work he was doing, regardless of what his point of view is. At least he was down there giving attention to Occupy, and giving some to himself. But now he just sits in the studio and talks bullshit and has Cassandra Fairbanks and other complete, alt-right morons and talks about Jesse Smollett. So I would suggest I would suggest to him some other media sources, because I don't think you don't waste your time. It would be, I guess, the short answer for this.
Yeah, I think that's about right. He's a pretty goofy guy. I'm always amazed that he has such a big following, but
it's bizarre. It's because there's something, because when you elaborate reactionary positions explicitly and unapologetically, like Ben Shapiro does, it caps some of your audience, I think. Like, Tim Pool's doing what Dave Rubin was doing, which is like, I'm a reluctant reactionary just because the left is so out of control. And I mean, that's the real wave as far as grifters go, I think.
I think that's about right. All right. I sent something to you in the chat. This is a story I just think is really important for us to cover, because how we did all that work, those interviews with Marshall Steinbaum, about the kind of flip that we're seeing from our political opponents, our class opponents, when it comes to talking about equity, and historical inequity, to basically subvert labor law, right, and trying to couch it as something that, or present it as something that's progressive, right, and forward looking. Well, the Trump, the Department of Labor, the Trump Department of Labor, put out a new rule, which is the darling child of the restaurant lobby, something they've been trying to push for years and years and years. And they push it at the end of the year right now. People aren't really paying attention. And it's something that will have disastrous consequences. So this piece right here is for Business Insider. And I think it actually does a pretty good job at covering the issue with the law. A new Trump rule could cost waiters more than $700 million in lost wages by allowing employers to take more of their tips to pay other workers. Basically what this new rule is it will allow for a restaurant employer to take tips from front of the house staff, so people who are, waiters, bartenders, hosts, things like that, and use those tips to also pay dishwashers and cooks. And the kind of the flip here, the way that they're trying to present this is that it's trying to push back against a historical inequity, that there is pay discrepancy oftentimes between front of the house staff and back of the house staff, especially at fancy places, where a waiter can make a significant amount of money from tips, right, at a fancy restaurant. So they're trying to couch this like, oh, look how progressive this is, because we're now allowing the back of the house to get more money. This is incredibly disingenuous, because what they're now doing is, instead of requiring that businesses pay their employees more, right, or a fair wage or a regular wage, they're actually spreading around, the small amount of tips for most workers to everybody on staff, right? This is another way to force, basically, to cut all labor costs for employers. And that is, for the most part, what the restaurant industry is at its most exploitative, is that it has all of these workers who are, doing labor, creating all this profit. And because of the tip system at the front of the house, the employer doesn't have to pay them nothing, $2 an hour, right? What this system does now is it actually spreads that pool. So now front of the house staff will be making less. And guess who's making more? The restaurant owner. So this is a pretty disgusting.
Well, David, they're the ones that are taking the risk of, the enterprise. So I would be reasonable.
They're the ones who are being sexually harassed or being asked to take their mask off by nasty control freaks who go out to eat across this country. But this is something that's really significant. The EPI, the Economic Policy Institute, said that this new regulation could cost workers $700 million a year. It's absolutely devastating. And then again, you'll get from opponents saying like, well, there is a minimum wage in this country, and that if workers aren't getting that minimum wage, then the employer has to pay that minimum wage. Somebody who's saying that has never worked in a restaurant in their life. I have worked in restaurants all my life, and I'll tell you one thing. There was never a situation where, if I had a bad day, that my employer was going to honor that kind of minimum wage rule. That is one of the most skirted rules in this country. People keep on saying, people repeat that over and over and over, but that has really never been the case anywhere. Your manager's job, even if you work at a big chain that's worried about, getting a labor lawsuit against them, your manager's job is to try to find ways to squeak your hours to make it seem like you weren't working at certain times, so that they don't have to pay you that minimum wage. Those people are very, very skilled at, avoiding having to pay.
That's
people.
the main job, is to make sure you schedule in the most optimal way to save the most money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, it's a pretty nasty, it's a pretty nasty rule change, but I just think it's really important to remember that, one, this is something that's going to hurt workers. It's a way for the bosses to avoid having to pay back of the house workers. And two, to notice what's going on with capital and our opponents and these huge lobbies, is that they're trying to do anti-worker regulations and present them as if, oh, look, this is historical. Right now, back of the house employees can get tips as well, right? When what they're actually saying is like, this is historical. Now the bosses of this restaurant can make even more in profit and pay their employees even less than before.
Yep. On sort of relatedly, on the Uber front, we got this article from KQED, and this is from Argivan, a labor reporter. In flyers and ads, the company boasted about creating more than 100,000 entrepreneurs. The company then adopted the term driver partners. Most recently, Uber managers and PR people have been calling workers earners. I mean,
that's so good. Yeah, exactly.
It is amazing. Like, you hire Yale English grads to try to fuck labor over on an insanely mass scale. It's pretty fun, and they're doing it for you guys. They just want to recognize that certain people were left out of labor protections of the past, and we want to make sure that everyone's left out of them in the future. So that's the brave new world. And yeah, I mean, we'll be touching on this again in the future.
No, for sure. And again, this is something we need to keep the pressure on, because this is another kind of thing that's going to be tough to remind people of post Trump. I saw there's one more Discord question that popped in, but before we get to that, I just wanted to do this last story, just something else for people to note. You know, one of the big goals of this new project and this new show is to make sure that we're covering as much as possible, you know, what's going on in Indian country and the kind of unique struggles that are happening with the tribal governments. And this story is just a good reminder of how much of a slime ball Donald Trump is, and all of those and all the assholes that he's elevated are. So this is a story in the Texas Observer. I'll just share the title real quick for people to check out. And again, this is one of my favorite local state-focused publications. But it says, as companies build thousands of cell towers, indigenous nations are faced with difficult choices. In Texas, a tiny staff of tribal officials field hundreds of requests each day to build 5G towers in areas of cultural and historic importance. And it's by Polly Dentonclaw. So I want to shout that out. But yeah, this story is very interesting. So basically, remember that moron and troll Ajit Pai at the FCC? He basically skirted a bunch of regulations that are meant to protect indigenous people in this country. So essentially, right now we're seeing, this expansion of 5G cell phone towers across the country. They're expecting that it's going to take around like 650,000 towers to be able to provide 5G to people. And what that means is that all of these towers are going to be going through reservations, but also to areas of historical, spiritual importance to Native American people. So even though those lands are not their reservations that they directly control, those tribes, especially across the South, have specific rights laid out.
Treaty rights
laid out with the United States government, that, certain sacred sites will be protected. So let me read from the piece. So basically what has happened in the past is you have what are called tribal historic preservation officers. And these people get requests from any kind of building project, road rape project, or a cell tower project that might be in lands where there is likely to be either a historical site or an important spiritual site. And they review it. And beforehand, they could either approve or deny it. And beforehand, they had also been able to charge fees for that process, because it takes a lot of man hours and time and resources from the tribes to be able to do that. And it's also important to note that historically, those fees have been really important for historic preservation offices in tribes to function. Like that's how they get the majority of their income, to be able to do that important historical preservation work. So Ajit Pai is reading from the piece. Ajit Pai, the Trump administration's appointment to the FCC, circumvented the NHPA and the National Environmental Protection Act by exempting small cell towers under 50 feet from review and blocking tribal governments from reviewing and regulating tower construction. 5G cell towers are built under 50 feet. So that was challenged, and they do have to be reviewed now, but they're not allowed to collect fees. And the reason that this is a problem is that you have a small tribe or an underfunded tribe receiving hundreds of these applications a week, an impossible amount for them to be able to go through systematically. And these applications, again, aren't just limited to those cell towers, but because there's such an explosion of these cell towers being built across the country, these organizations are at capacity and they're not able to bill the hours that they're using, that they're spending to review these cases, right? And this is exactly how the unfortunate reality that we will likely see these towers being built up on important spiritual locations or historical locations. At the end of the day, the land that belongs to these tribes. And it's something that, is worth, paying attention to and bringing it up. I know there's a lot going on right now, but this is really important stuff. And these are, historical legacies and spiritual legacies that need to be protected.
Yeah. And if you need a selfish reason to support this is like the land, like the stewardship of these people. Like this is these tribal authorities are and rights for not going over important lands are how they tried to stop Dakota Access Pipeline as well and gummed up the works there. And I think it's in well, I remember, I can't remember where this was reported, but that in that process between the Army Corps of Engineers and Dakota Access Energy Transfer Partners, there was like the energy transfer partners were getting really annoyed by it and annoyed to the point of saying really racist things in emails. And the Army Corps of Engineers is like, hey, if that comes out in a lawsuit, you're going to blow this whole project. Like that's the sort of shit that people have to deal with here. And yeah, I think anytime we can help Indigenous sovereignty of lands that they rightfully should have control over. I mean, we talk about foreign policy and that stuff being important, and this is a subset of that for those reasons. And I mean, you see that also in Canada with like the Mi'kmaq and the what's going on in Nova Scotia and the fishing stuff there. Like they're very much on the cutting edge of what's being cut into. And always, whether it's pipelines or whether it's, any sort of infrastructure, right? Like you go back to the damming of the Missouri, Nick Estes in his book talks about the damming of the upper Missouri. You have Berta Carceres, that was a hydroelectric dam. Like this is the pattern, right? We have to have some pattern recognition and be able to call it for what it is and be there for the people who are, being put under the mill.
Yeah. And, I also just have to state too that, not all the tribes in the United States have these kind of offices because they can't afford it. And it's something that, T-Mobile doesn't deserve to just be able to flood and waste the time of these people without having to pay them. And, it's something that it needs to be flipped. These are the kind of small rules that Trump was able to do. The last one we talked about with tipping, and this as well, things that need to be fixed. And they won't be fixed unless we can have the awareness and the kind of political support necessary to push them. Because it's disgusting to think that anybody's losing, a historical site so that T-Mobile can put another cell tower up in Alabama, right?
Yeah.
When it could just be moved somewhere else.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. All right, man. I think we're good. So I'll just answer this because somebody asked in the Discord. Shane asked, do you think there will be a second stock market crash in 2021 with the lockdowns when or if there are mass eviction foreclosures kick off? Well, I think, no, I mean, I first of all, I don't think it's particularly helpful to try to predict a stock market rupture. I'll tell you this, that, the high prices we're seeing in stocks right now are very much floated by the fact that the Federal Reserve has moved with unprecedented speed and skill into bolstering the bottom lines of rich people and providing people essentially free money, low interest loans. And also they're coming into the debt market and just buying up corporate debt basically puts a very high floor there. So it's a very secure time for the rich to be able to speculate, which means that, it's susceptible to shocks, of course. But we've seen that our economic system is pretty good now at protecting those at the very, very top. And I think you tying it to evictions is interesting because that just shows how untethered the stock market is actually to the lived reality of people. Where if you were to see mass evictions because of COVID, I wouldn't be so certain that you would actually see that reflected in stock prices, except for as a signal of a lack of confidence in the U.S. economy going forward, right? That would be the effect of it, because the people who are getting evicted, don't buy and sell on the stock market, and for people who are able to, evictions can be, quite good for right. Building management companies, right?
That's what I was going to say is you have a whole bunch of landlords who are wait a second, shouldn't you be helping us out a little bit? And no, if you are a small landlord and a major company can come eat up your property because you go bankrupt because you're not getting rent payments anymore. That's good for them, and that's what they're waiting for. That's what this crisis is being used for right now.
Yeah. Exactly. No, there's going to be, I mean, there already is. I mean, the Starbucks CEO is, bragging the other day in the Financial Times that, things are looking good for them because all the small coffee shops around the world have had to close, meaning that, more and more people's only option will be Starbucks. I mean, there's going to be a feeding frenzy on the other side of this, which is going to be really unfortunate. But
on that note,
yeah, I mean, well, I just want to say, everybody, because this will be our last stream. 2020 has been, I don't know, it's almost cliche to say anything like this, but it's been a crazy, crazy year. But being able to have this community has meant so much through all of the difficulty, that we have all been through, and the love and support that y'all have shown us after us losing our really good friend Michael at the beginning of this year has meant a lot to us, and I'm really thankful for all of you out there. And best wishes to everybody in the next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise, I just second everything David says. I, as far as rest of the week, I'm gonna do a Matt and Mark stream on Friday. Well, maybe not, because that is New Year's Day. Yeah, I'll do one on New Year's Day. How?
Nice.
If not on, then expect one Saturday. So one of those two. But until then, folks, we will see you later.